Do you want to start off with Ashley? Good choice.
I understand you.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is the continuation of our morning meeting. It is April 10th, and it is 2:03. We did delay a few items from this morning that we were not able to get to, so we're going to quickly move through those. So let's lead off with Ash. Oh, and please let the record reflect that as we're reconvening, those present in the conference room are Commissioners French and Kearns. We have Commissioner Jordan on Zoom with us right now. So let's lead off with Ashley Cameron, hearing examiner position update.
Wonderful. Thank you, commissioners. We'll just wanted to give you an update from the last time that we discussed the hearing examiner. So I have been working with Ms. Bordahl as the top candidate to determine how we can get her into that position. And so she is still residing in Florida, but is planning on relocating to the Spokane area, but as we discussed, her timeline is a little bit mushy still. Recognizing the strengths and the experience that she brings, and being tasked to go to partner with her, we have been able to have some great dialogue and think that the best option is while she is living in Florida, because we as the county are not set up and equipped to have employees who reside in Florida due to payroll taxes, labor laws, all of those fun things. It makes more sense to employ her as a contractor for the time being while she and her husband or her partner relocate back to the area. As we've discussed, a good portion of our hearings were conducted via Zoom and still are actually in many cases. And so she is incredibly comfortable with doing that until she's able to relocate here, but also does plan on being on site to get herself going, make sure she's well acquainted with the county. And then as needed, if she does need to be here on site, is open to traveling until such time she's here full time. So I wanted to provide that update to you. We're hopeful that she'll be here sooner rather than later, but this affords us the opportunity to begin working with her while she's making that transition. She did already clear our background process, so she's made it through that, and she has provided notice to her employer and would like to officially start with us on May 18th, which is a Monday. So that gives her enough time. I'm sorry, the 15th, May 15th, gives her enough time to give her employer notice, get travel set up, and then be able to get into Spokane for those first week or two to get all of her laptop and orientation and all of the things that she would need to be able to be effective. So that's where we're at. I am finishing with Chris Anderson's help getting the contract finalized, scope of work, so that we can get that signed by her and then have it available for consent agenda next Tuesday. So that's where I'm at with my progress updates, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
Any questions? Mr. French?
Yeah, so I did reach out to a couple other county commissioners that are in not the same situation we are, but are moving to doing actually all of their hearings remotely under the hearing examiner format and stuff. And I asked, why are you moving to that format? They said it makes it easier for the applicants, and it also makes it easier for the public to participate in a virtual meeting than it is for them to travel and try and participate and stuff. So what we are doing is not atypical, it's probably actually becoming more typical. And so it raises an interesting question as to whether even after she's here, whether we want to continue to have hearings remotely for benefit of the public. So I just thought I'd add that to the conversation.
And I can tell you what I was doing this last year. The hearings that weren't all remote, we were having a remote option on all of them. So I was present in person. Generally, the planners were present in person, and the attorneys were almost always present in person, but we always had the Zoom link up and had witnesses and other public participation remotely.
Good. Okay,
All right,
great.
sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, now back to our regularly scheduled program. We have Scott Chesney and Jessica Pilgrim, and it says 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendments Briefing. And I do understand there is an executive schedule or executive session after this presentation, correct? Okay. And then I think then we do have some miscellaneous items that we'll handle, and we'll go back into executive session for, I guess, a number of more items. So you two take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner Kearns, the Commissioner Scott. We are before you on what is traditionally the annual cycle to bring comprehensive plans into the system, and that's done traditionally through your initiation process. And they are before you generally meeting the basic platforms, the basic policies for initiation. And as we've done before, we're going to go through the whole list. We'll give you some of the Planning Commission's feedback. We will tell you some of what we've heard from the outside at this moment. So the slide you can see shows almost a familiar pattern. We have a group of plan amendments clustered on our West Plains, another on the north side of the metro, and a couple on the east side, north and south of Spokane Valley. The next slide, please. Thanks, Rob.
So before you move on,
Sure.
so I met with the mayor for Medical Lake on Friday, and she was talking about them wanting to pursue a land swap.
Yes.
And so I'd asked if she had talked to you yet, and she said, yes, we have. So would that land swap be included in the 2023 action, or is that something that will happen independently of 2023?
It will be independent of this group of amendments.
Okay. Is that the same situation for Cheney?
Not necessarily. Cheney submitted a formal application for a comprehensive plan amendment back in December of 22 in the normal horizon. So that is in your package that you'll see in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Medical Lake, we've had conversations with them. They have not brought forth anything specific in terms of acreages or sizes or even locations. We know generally they want to relocate from the north side of their community, which is up tight against Fairchild, to the
Right.
east side, which is better for growth. But we anticipate that they would do that likely as part of the 26 plan update.
I think their timetable is more urgent than that, based upon my conversation with the mayor. So would not be surprised to see an application this year.
Okay.
Just a heads up.
On this slide, you can generally see how we go through this process. Most of you know how this goes. There are really the ways of a project is initiated. The board can initiate on its own. The staff through the planning director based on changing conditions or warrants. The board based on individual requests for amendment, and then the periodic update itself. The amendments before you today fill the second and third bullet of this cycle. And we've got a couple things that kind of are previewing this. We've got 14 applications from landowners this year and 3 amendments initiated by the county. We'll get to all of them today. It's a significant number for sure, and it's important to advise the board that work on these follows on a parallel path with the capital facilities plan. And in terms of action, the work on that capital facilities plan needs to precede ultimate accepting of these comprehensive plan amendments. We will have more on that as the show goes on, as you say. And as also you know, the CFP is subject to some external influences. One good piece of news we heard this morning, last week the state Senate passed what's called the climate bill, which is a challenging bill for Spokane County in many ways, along with many other counties. But it is the vehicle by which we were able to add some language for capital facilities programming with our colleagues at King County, also supported by FutureWise, as it turns out. And that gives us some relief from the dealing with special districts in the CFP, meaning the schools, fire districts, water, and other that don't plan under GMA rules, but we were ultimately held accountable for that. Now we have the due diligence to say, if we try to get this and they can't or are unable to provide it, we are not held out of compliance for that effort. So that's a small but a really important step that happened. WASAC believes that the House will in fact go along with the Senate's amendment, and so they're confident that this bill will become law. Obviously, as they say, it ain't over till it's over, but it's encouraging that we've got one step in our CFP, which relates to the rest of our work. Next slide, please. This is the cycle we go through to get here. You can see, generally speaking, November to December 20th is when these are accepted. They're based on specific amendment criteria in our zoning code, which is based on the RCWs. It's important to remember that your initiation is not approval. It is simply the acknowledgement that these meet that criteria for consideration, and no conclusions are really yet warranted. We also show here the planning staff does preview sessions that we've done for the second year in a row. They've become very popular, and we've gotten good comments early on some of the projects. So that process has been codified, if you will, and is now something that will be done on an annual basis. Next slide, please. These are the 14 submitted amendments. Quick summary. They're a little more varied than in the recent past. And these are, they're predominantly proposing residential development as always, but one is proposing a shift to light industrial near the airport, and another is proposing a shift in agricultural use to a cluster and open space category, and that's near Medical Lake. For the residential applications, these represent collectively and at what we would call typical buildable densities, about 375 to 400 single-family homes and approximately 15 to 1,600 multifamily units if these were all to develop. Next slide, please. First amendment is off on the West Plains north of Highway 2. Next slide. This, right along the bottom of this slide is Fairchild Air Force Base, Highway 2. The element is, or the proposed amendment rather, is in red. You can see it's 317 acres. Request is to go from rural traditional to an R5. So this is outside of the UGA. Next slide, please. And therefore is an entirely rural request. The challenge for this one is very simply put, it is under the influence of military influence area 3 and 4. As you recall, those were created as part of the joint land use study in 2011, 2012, and county zoning now has adopted those. In rural residential, they allow residential units on a 1 per 10 acre, 1 dwelling unit per 10 acre basis. This proposal wants to go to a 5 acre site and therefore is directly in conflict with the JLUS recommendation or the JLUS regulations. And so the Planning Commission, in their vote to recommend this amendment to you, that vote failed unanimously. So they are not recommending this one going forward. Next slide, please. This is the Cheney amendment, and I recognize this, we'll show you this big map as we go through each of them. The upcoming amendment is always in the green box. Next slide, please. Cheney is proposing a 10 acre for 10 acre swap from UGA lands that are to their southeast. On the other side of railroad tracks, a lot of critical areas. A lot of these are somewhat unbuildable in kind of a current circumstance. And they are proposing to take some land out of that UGA, recognizing it's really unbuildable, and attach it to the North UGA, which is more in the lines of where they are allowed to grow. The applicant for this also noted the Cheney Planning Commission has approved this formally and sent it forward. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend BOCC initiation. Next slide. Number 3, and these are in the order they were received. They're not geographic, so they bounce around the metro here a little bit. This is over on the east side, on the north side of the valley, city of the valley. Next slide, please. This is a swap, again, another swap that reflects a plat that has been in the works for some time. You can see the single-family part of that to the north of the highway, and that's Trent, by the way, with Barker Road coming up right in the middle of it. On the south side, between the single-family lots and the highway, roughly is about these 28 acres that was in the original plat in the UGA. And this is really a peninsula UGA. It attaches to the city of the valley at the south. There's no other urban growth area bounded around it. What they wish to do is swap that with lands to the immediate east, and kind of above the bend in the road as it goes over the tracks, or it goes over the highway. And the reasons are that the existing lands are steep slopes, hard to develop. They were originally, planned with a multifamily component that was not done at the time. And so they're wanting to use the more easily developed flat slopes to the east and swap this out. Challenges that we're going to have to look at here, you've heard us before, because of the settlement agreement section 10.1, an acre per acre for swap is not as simple as it is. It has to be understood through being able to be served by capital facilities. And those are also transportation facilities. The concurrency arguments all come to the fore here. And one of the concerns, at least early concerns, is road access to the existing subdivision is already established. A second road access is going to be established through the roundabout at Barker and Trent. And the public utilities or the urban services for the single family subdivision run along the second road along the edge of this UGA parcel. To swap this out means somehow being able to state that by taking these lands out and moving them for shorter term development to the east, that the remaining lands are not going to develop in any probable way for a 20-year horizon. That will be a little bit of a challenge because they'll be surrounded by utilities and urban services. It doesn't mean it's an impossible task, but it also is not necessarily something that is straightforward. And that's that. There's a second issue. The original applicant believes their multifamily right will transfer with the land. Planning staff is not yet convinced that that is the case. And part of it is this is quite an old plat, and part of it is what vested and when did it vest? Because they're claiming a multifamily development effort, but the zoning is still LDR, single family. And so at the very least, the question will be, and we'll bring all this analysis back to you. The question will be, if that zoning translates to the new lands, how do you justify a multifamily component on top of now a single family zone? And so we will be looking at that as the analysis goes forward. Next slide, please. Fourth one is back on the West Plains. Next slide. This one's a little more unusual for what we have done in the recent past, in that it is a residential parcel requesting to go to light industrial. It is just off of Geiger Road, and it is a group that wants to build some jobs and warehousing with an enclosed small office on the site, and would like to use the benefits of light industrial zoning. We have no objections to this. The airport is very supportive of this kind of development. We're going to revisit this at the end of, toward the end of our presentation in CPA or CPAIR 16, which is going to look at something around that. But no issues here. Next slide, please. Number 5 is on the north side of the metro. Next slide. This is at the triangle of Country Homes Boulevard and Wall Street. The applicant is requesting to go from an LDR to high-density residential to build infill homes, some for potentially seniors' use, but also to fill in the lands behind the church that exists on the site. It's a good candidate for that. It's on transit routes, it's close to commercial, it's close to green spaces. And we, at this point, we see no objections, or we see no hurdles here. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend this for board initiation. Next, please.
What, I'm sorry, before you go, the north-south street there,
Wall?
is that Wall and then that's Monroe coming into it? On the diagonal?
It's
Country Homes.
Country Homes.
Country Homes?
Yeah,
Okay, now I know where you're at. Thank you.
it's up near the triangle. the other
Yeah,
side.
we've got it.
The church is going to build the homes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Or at the very least, a partner with them. Where are we here? Number 6. Back to the valley on the south side. Next slide, please. There's a series of these in a row here that are, in one sense, you could almost consider them infill development. You can see this is at Highway 27 and 32nd. Most of the lands around this on 3 sides have already been moved into a multifamily designation, with single family to the east in the more topographically challenging lands. In a way, this allows for what we would consider fairly logical site assembly to allow for multifamily to be designed and implemented on a more integrated scale. The Planning Commission voted unanimously for board initiation of this number 6. Next slide, please. Number 7, still on the West Plains. Next slide. South of Garden Springs Boulevard off of I-90, you can see to the immediate north of this is already a zoned multifamily parcel. It is still residential. The request is go to a medium density. More of, in this case, it's not a transition away from an industrial or a non-residential category. It's reflecting the idea or the opportunity for higher density development in an area that looks on the surface pretty well suited for it. It has good access under the freeway, so it can move about, and has the ability of being, centrally part of a residential neighborhood. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend this for your initiation. Next slide, please.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
sorry, can you clarify what's the orange and the yellow on this map here?
Certainly. The lighter yellow is LDR or single family detached zoning. The orange or slightly darker color is medium density residential, and the slightly darker ochre shade, red shade is high density residential zoning. So they're all residential classifications in that area. The lilac is light industrial to the southwest.
Ron, can you go back one slide?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
there we go.
that there. Okay.
What was the lilac again?
Light industrial.
Okay, and the light yellow is currently low density, you're saying?
That's correct.
And then the orange is current medium.
Correct.
Okay, and can you refresh my memory? What is the parcels per lot that differentiates those in county code? Or the units per lot, or whatever the measurement is?
LDR is allowed units up to 8 per acre, and in
Okay.
some cases 10 with a density bonus that has design elements attached to it. Medium density residential goes up to 15 units an acre, and high density residential is anything beyond 15 an acre.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Number 8, next slide, please. This is a little more similar to what we've seen in the last couple of years. I realize it's a little hard to see the red boundaries on the parcels on that lilac background. They're right in the center exactly. Ron's got them right there. This is about 19 acres. There is large lot to the east. There's some residential single family to the northeast. To the south of this, even though it is in Lilac, is the Aspen Park subdivision, which is platting and building out as single-family residential. So this is not quite the anomaly that it looks like in terms of that area. This is also one of those areas, along with the general West Plains, but specifically the city and the county have agreed to take a look at what this boundary looks like between the urban growth area lands and the non-urban growth area lands, those large lots, rural traditional, rural conservation to the east. And so there's a longer term study in here where I think the city and county both realize that the pressure on this part of the UGA is going to be significant over the next few years. Next slide, please. I did not have it on this one, I'm sorry.
With, the commission, the planning commissioners recommended in favor by a majority for CPAR 08, except for Whitstruck voted nay.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Number 9. This is the one near Medical Lake. There you go. It is a large group of parcels, 200 acres plus. The request is to move these away from long-term, large tract ag into a rural conservation setting that would allow cluster development and preservation of open space. The idea of de-designating ag lands is complicated by the Growth Management Act, as all the resource lands are valued highly by GMA, and requires literally a county-wide assessment of ag lands' capabilities and capacities before you can de-designate lands. So this will be a much more complex aspect. There's also, again, contained in our settlement agreement, a 60-day notice to FutureWise and the plaintiffs in the settlement agreement of any attempt to de-designate ag lands. And so this was brought to the Planning Commission as an introduction. The Planning Commission moved and voted to defer this until the 60-day notice was complied with and any other GMA issues are packaged and necessary to bring it back. So this one is on hold. Next one, please. Number 10. Also on the West Plains. Next slide. This is what we would consider a bit more complicated, and it's in that it's surrounded by existing, and it's that red parcel in the center, excuse me, low density residential immediately to the south, but you can see it is surrounded by existing business uses. So this is a parcel, a 6-acre parcel extending kind of into the middle of business uses. That's a little different from some of those we've seen in the past that have been more contiguous to more emerging or existing residential, or have a better reason for being in that residential category. The Planning Commission voted in favor of sending this forward for initiation by a 6-to-1 vote, with Commissioner Whitstruck voting nay. Next, please. 11, back to the North Metro, off of Hastings Road. We have been down this road together in the last couple of years. There have been several amendments along here that have generally increased residential density. This one is another that we would consider essentially site assembly, bringing that small remaining LDRPs into a package that allows medium and high densities that would provide for a better unified site to develop a higher quality residential product. Along Hastings, there are plans for expanded transit, somewhat along Farwell as well, with the idea that, as we kind of hinted at last year, there's a piece of land that is WashDOT right-of-way that is just off of Newport Highway as this intersects that, almost across from Costco. And the discussions with STA are ongoing on whether that could be a north side transportation station of some kind. So this is an area where multifamily is most appropriate in that it's going to have many of the elements and attributes that you want around places that would not necessarily then have to have multiple cars per dwelling unit. There were, as always, there were traffic concerns related to this and some concern about distances to parks, although it was also noted that it's fairly proximate to the Children of the Sun Trail. The Planning Commission did recommend board initiation, in this case by a 5-2 vote, with Commissioners Hasse and Brokaw voting nay. Next, please. 12, remaining on the north side. Next slide. This is along Mill Road, a group of single-family parcels, kind of stretching through challenging hilly areas, so to speak. And you can see in the upper third that red assemblage of 2 parcels requesting to go to a medium density residential classification from the single family. It's an established single family area. You can see some mixed use in that red right at the bottom of the slide, but that's not a residential category, just to be clear on this slide. This is in Whitworth Water District. One change in Spokane County would be the wastewater provider here. So it's an infill site. There is sewer on and in these particular parcels, so that it has been at least thought of in some way for some time. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend initiation of this parcel. Next, please. 13, back to the West Plains side. And 13 and 14 are related. 13 is the edge of the former, just past the edge of the former Fairways Golf Course. And it is proposed to go from an LDR to an MDR resignation, 10 acres. It's on South Hayford, has good transportation access, is a logical candidate to have, higher density multifamily along that corridor, even buffering some of the residential to its east. This was one of the areas that was of concern to the Cheney School District, however, and I think we alluded to this one of the last times we talked. Historically, it's very hard to get these special districts to even comment on projects, and oftentimes what that leads to is an assumption of acquiescence because they didn't say no. We have reached out and established relationships with most of our school districts, increasingly our fire districts, water districts, to engage them in these conversations. And Cheney was very forthcoming in this round of applications. And they were pretty clear on this and number 14. Their comment was very simply, the increase from LDR to MDR in this region would have an impact on our school systems. The area currently is all bused to the city of Cheney due to lack of space in the neighborhood school. And so they have essentially made that clear that they're reaching a limit of being able to support comprehensive or support new development out here that wasn't previously planned. And that, of course, is suggesting that the timing is good for the 26 plan update to bring these partners to the table and look at where they are able to grow over these future years. This CPAIR was initially voted down by 3-4. After some discussion about the schools, it was moved to reconsider, and the move to reconsider was passed 5-2, and then subsequently the motion to recommend to you for initiation was approved 5-2, with Commissioners Wittstruck and Camp-Boreal voting nay. I need to note, however, that the motion to reconsider was not properly offered at the time. It was offered by the chair, and he had voted in the affirmative on the original motion. I'm sorry, he had voted against the original motion, and only someone who votes in the affirmative is able to vote for reconsideration. That was pointed out at the next meeting, and the board the commission went ahead at the previous meeting where the motion was made. They went ahead and reconsidered and voted 5-2. When it was brought up that the parliamentary motion was incorrect, they chose to stand by their own vote and did not choose to re-vote or re-participate.
Thought it was in the prevailing side, could bring it up for reconsideration. So if you were on the side, but you said it failed 4-3. So someone who voted no would be able to bring it back up, because that was the prevailing side of the vote, correct? The noes had more
Yes,
votes than the, so someone that voted no could bring it back up.
correct.
You said
Chairman
that individual
Cole
voted
voted
against.
aye.
Oh, he didn't vote.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said he had
Yeah.
voted
It was
against
confusing.
it, which is why he
I
couldn't.
was not at the meeting, so I'm going by recordings of
Okay.
remembrances and things.
Gotcha.
We try to catch those parliamentary things before they get a little bit crazy, but that's kind of a fundamental one.
Yeah.
You have to be on the prevailing side to reconsider something, or you get a never-ending series of votes.
Yeah.
But after hearing that, they chose to not take any other action, including the member who brought up the parliamentary mistake. So we decided to simply go forward. So they have a 5-2 vote. Commissioners Whitstruck and Camporeal were voting nay on the final vote. 14. Next door, roughly. Next slide. This is the remainder of the golf course. And I guess what was called part of the front nine had transitioned a couple of years ago. That's the single family piece you see between the one you just talked about and this remaining. This is being proposed to go from an LDR designation to an MDR with a potential neighborhood commercial around their clubhouse area. Again, Cheney Schools made an even stronger statement on this one. Their statement was, quote, "The increased MDR zoning would be a significant impact on our school systems. We do not have enough space in our schools to support increased density populations in this area at this time." And so if nothing else, that suggests that a great deal of thought needs to go into what else is going on here in terms of providing either school capacity for Cheney Schools or some other component to this. The other issue with this is, of course, transitioning a golf course into residential development. In the preview meetings, one of the ideas that was talked about is adding a planned development overlay to their zoning request, which would allow for essentially development agreement style elements to be negotiated as part of an overall zoning capacity, which then would allow for buffers, it would allow for amenities, walking paths, open spaces that could provide some assurance to the existing homeowners of what's going to happen next door, rather than simply a multifamily designation that would allow a large number of 3-story walk-ups and garages going into an area that they had purchased a home on the edge of a golf course, thinking the golf course may be there forever. So potentially adding that overlay could be a development issue for them. Mr. French.
So are you familiar with the potential interest that Public Works and Parks has in this property around the lake and creating a natural area, walking paths and all that kind of fun stuff?
We have heard some of that, yes. We have heard some conflicting issues. One of an earlier negotiation with Parks for the area around the lake itself that didn't prove fruitful at the time. And then a comment that Parks is actively looking at 20 acres south of this project, immediately south of it,
Right.
would be off-site. We have no more details than that level of info.
So my understanding is that Public Works might have an interest in this pond lake area for part of their drainage system in this area and stuff. So
That would be
I
smart.
would encourage maybe a conversation with either Matt or Kyle to get up to speed on that.
They were part of our preview and did note, in fact, that we would want to look at this for stormwater considerations at the very least.
Okay.
And the developer, at least in that first round of, what do I want to do with this, wants to preserve the lake, wants to preserve a lot of amenities, and that's why they were at least agreeable to the understanding of an
Right.
overlay or a development agreement or something that would nail those things down
Right.
ahead of time.
And so part of the challenge the school district has is the elementary school that they built in this area is grossly undersized and it's landlocked. And so they need to find another site for another school, or as they indicated, bus. and stuff. So did they offer any indication as to what they would be pursuing?
Not yet. The only thing kind of beyond their public comment was the question of whether the county would consider impact fees for schools that might provide them something as a tool to move forward.
Impact fees are not going to pay for a new school. So it really, I mean, the impact fees might supplement some of that cost, but, until they get into the state system and find out, what they're gonna do for another school in this area. I mean,
We certainly know of a couple of years ago now, the Oswald Ewing project had made some allowance for both the high school and the middle school
Yeah.
on part of that property. So there have clearly been some discussions among property owners in the school district. But on one sense, we're really happy to have a better relationship with Cheney schools where we can finally talk to them honestly about what your needs are, because that will
Right.
help us run interference sometimes, so to speak. But I don't know of any other private conversations that have been had.
Okay, thank you.
These next three are those that are coming from staff perspective. 15, and you can see just a really broad area here. 15 is an idea that we brought to you last year and simply didn't have time to package it. But it's taking 3 existing subdivisions that are in the West Plains that were allowed during days when residential could go into industrial areas. And as you recall, or maybe, the light industrial zoning was amended in 2005 to allow commercial uses, and commercial uses at that time allowed residential. And then residential was removed from light industrial lands as a permitted use in 2007. And so these 3, Crystal Meadows, Maple Terrace, and Aspen Park, all came in invested between December of 2005 and February of 2007, while that was allowed. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend this for initiation, and all it will do simply is it will change the designation of those subdivision boundaries from light industrial to low-density residential. Nothing beyond the boundaries, simply the boundary of the plat itself to reflect the kind of use that is going on there. There are always interpretations of how significant mismatch zoning with development is. But at the very least, if you've got the right zoning for the land, you have less challenges on insuring your property. Replacing it is usually not an issue, but replacing and expanding could be an issue. ADUs, for example, are not allowed in light industrial because there's no residential allowed anymore. Whereas if this goes back into a single family home, it would allow homeowners to take advantage of emerging accessory dwelling units, for example. So this is essentially a housekeeping amendment. And the next 3 maps, Ron, if you can kind of go really somewhat quickly, you can see this is Aspen Park. We talked about the project to the north of it. You've seen those to the south and the the west of it. In the last couple of years, you can see the school right down there in the corner. That's already platted for residential and would move into this. The next one would be Maple Terrace, smaller project, but almost fully built out. The remaining areas are really stormwater management areas. So this gives them essentially zoning protection. And the next one called Crystal Meadows, same thing, right adjacent to the golf course, and provides, again, that really nothing more than a housekeeping zone to make that happen. Next on to 16, please. This is back at the airport. Next slide. And it's a study area rather than a parcel. You can see on the very southwest corner of this is the parcel originally proposed, or is proposed as CPAIR 04, requesting to go from residential into light industrial zoning. You can see one light industrial zoning immediately next to it. Our colleagues at the city suggested that this would be a good candidate to look at comprehensively to see if some or all of those parcels are better positioned for non-residential zoning rather than residential zoning. And so we believe that's a good study exercise and would like to carry that forward. That said, there's also no jumping of conclusions to think that the entire thing should be light industrial. There are a number, at least a small number, of established homes out there, fairly nice, secluded, if you would, neighborhood. And that could be something that they're very desirous of keeping, where perhaps along the edges that are more accessible for commercial traffic, there would be a better use for that as a light industrial capability. And the thing about the residential stabilization is that there could be a zoning category again with that planned development, which is not quite the way Spokane's is set up, but we believe could be, that could provide an interesting buffer between intensity of uses, so that if the edges along Geiger Road became light industrial, they may not have the same full range of industrial that would allow, say, a waste-to-energy plant. It might be something that is restricted to indoors or interior uses, no outside storage, or reduced noise or reduced hours, but could still be a job generator and preserve the quality of the residential character around it. So it's a study area as much as anything else. Very likely, with your initiation, this would go into the mix of studying with the city and the overall West Plains. Don't know if this would be packaged to come back this year or not, or whether the study area would suggest that it needs enough consideration to wait for 26. The Planning Commission did make a unanimous recommendation that the board initiate this amendment. Last one, 17, I'm sorry.
Before you leave this
Yes,
one,
sir.
so has there been any conversation with Larry Crowder at the airport or Lisa Cochran? Because there have been a couple property owners in this area that have approached the airport about selling the land, whatever.
In this case, we have had prior conversations with Larry, not specifically about this, but about this area in general. So we're aware of the airport's overall theme of reducing its residential neighbors as best it can. The only challenging part of this is it's really in the wedge between the runways. It's out of the
right.
safety zones. It's in ACZ 5,
Yeah.
which prohibits residential expansion in any case. But it's not quite as critical as the ones we addressed last year. We know the airport has in fact purchased a few of these properties, small lease properties.
Yep.
So we're presuming they would continue to support the analysis, at least, of whether this could happen.
Okay.
Lastly, we have two plats on the 5 Mile Prairie. You can see here on the north side of our community. Next, please. And this is, if not a housekeeping amendment, it's one that we find ourselves in as we move through the settlement agreement. These are two plats, total of about 88 acres. They were first proposed in 2005, I believe. And the applications were complete, but the applicants made no progress on them and didn't formally request to extend their plats. So by the planning department's recommendation, a determination was made that these had expired. That determination was made before the settlement agreement was finalized, and so these were not considered in the settlement agreement as being inside a UGA or outside of a UGA. They were not on the horizon. Developer asked for reconsideration of that, and the hearing examiner found these to be valid and vested. So they are allowed to go forward, but now we're in the conundrum of they are not in a UGA, and we have to essentially right-size the UGA to bring them in. What that means is also, because of other parts of the settlement agreement, section 10.1, we can do an acre for acre swap. We can't expand the UGA because of these. And that acre for acre swap has to make sure that these are fully available and capable of being served by urban services. So these are being studied and incorporated in the update of the CFP that we're working on. And as we've alluded to in the last time we briefed you, we have to find a donor site somewhere in the urban growth area of 88 acres to use this as a receiver site, because we are not able to simply expand the UGA. And we identified 3 of those potential sites before. Yeah, with your formal initiation in a couple of weeks, we will refine that and do some research and bring some options back to you. I would consider doing that in a study session well ahead of this thing wrapping itself up. But this is also one, because this one is related to, and I'll let Jessica give you the details if need be. This is part of ongoing litigation. So this one doesn't have to stay in the cycle with the rest of these 23 amendments. If there's a way of making this happen off cycle, we can do that. So commissioners, that in, well, something of a nutshell, a very long nutshell, is our summary of the CPAs for 2023. And again, the one admonishment I have that I know we have to talk about is we are under the influence of working with our CFP and bringing ourselves back into compliance to best be able to push these along. So your initiation will let the process continue, but we have to be clear that there are hurdles in this year's process that we are yet to anticipate.
How about the two comp plan amendments that were submitted last year that we continued to this one?
Thank you. Both of those are working on development agreements.
Okay.
One, what was called CPA02 on the West Plains, they're also looking at the planned development overlay as an alternate to the development agreement to lock down development standards into their zoning rather than the contract. They are, in a sense, they would come back into the cycle if they would, because they were simply deferred or remanded, if you will. Number 7, the industrial project, Harley Douglas. We have not heard from them in a little while. We know there's been a change of personnel in his development team, and I don't know how that's affected their priority to push that forward. We do have a meeting with the Finau Steel people that came up at the 11th hour and said, we're buying the Hanson property and we want to make, we want to put in a steel fabrication facility. We're meeting with them in the next couple of weeks to get a sense of what their plans are short and long term for the property. Or is it really going to be a heavy industrial use and area, which will give us some guidance on how we can advise Harley and his team.
Okay.
Commissioners, that's what I have for you today.
Okay.
Quick question.
Have an executive session that you wanted to take care of?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Hey, can just because I'm a little slow, can you, I was going to repeat what I think I understood in terms of the process. So basically the near-term action would be a decision on whether to initiate these amendments. And then if we do that, there's a hearing input process that the Planning Commission holds and then makes a recommendation back whether to adopt those, and then we would act on adopting them. Is that generally the process going forward?
Generally speaking, yes. The initiation sets forth essentially an assignment to the planning staff to study these based on GMA requirements and bring those conclusions and analyses to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. And then, as you said, they hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the board.
So those votes that you were referring to, that was the Planning Commission voting on whether we should initiate those particular amendments?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to also touch on the timeline on what the dates are that those would happen? Like when, if all of those things go as planned, when would these come back as us for a package to adopt for acceptance?
That's a little like, kicking a ball down the field, but if
Traditionally, it's in December though, right?
traditionally it's in December, we had these tied to a calendar that would get them back to you in late July or early August. That calendar assumed, one, that there were no fatal flaws in these of some kind, but it also assumed that we would be able to be in at least satisfactory compliance with our CFP in time for you and even the Planning Commission to act on these, and that we had the capacity to do all that work in that 6-month period of time. We haven't amended that calendar yet. But in some cases, it will be the pleasure of the board on, if you initiate these, then we'll have to look at how that calendar goes out. We can push them out to the end of the year depending on progress on the CFP. We had planned to do it a little more expeditiously this year. I think honestly, that's going to be a very hard schedule to meet.
Okay, any other questions?
What is the envisioned time frame for a decision on initiation, or is that part of the next session?
Typically, my understanding is, in briefing you today, next week you would have a resolution to receive these and set a date to initiate them, which would be the following Tuesday. So two Tuesdays from tomorrow, you would be requested to act on the initiation.
And it'll actually be 3 Tuesdays because the board is out the week of the 25th, so all in one. Yep, got it.
And they are a package deal,
No.
correct? No. Final adoption?
They can be taken, you can initiate some and not initiate others, so you can take them one at a time. The catch is, so you have different options, you can initiate, you can delay initiation until, or you can initiate and for consideration in 2026, you can initiate for consideration this year, you cannot initiate. Those are your main options. If you do anything that is different than what the Planning Commission recommended, you must hold a public hearing. So one thought for the board or the chair is whether or not these are to be set as a public meeting. The default under the code is that your initiations, the default is a public meeting. But like I said, if you're going to take any action that is different on any of these in the Planning Commission, then you'd have to hold a public hearing. So you could either set it as a public hearing from the outset and give yourself that leeway, or you can hold it as a public hearing, and as soon as it looks like you're gonna go a different direction, set it as a public hearing.
Public meeting.
Meeting first and then hearing. Yeah, I was like, wait, did I say public hearing twice? So yeah, it's there, but they're not a package deal. You can take them separately.
One more question. Would you folks mind sending me a list of, I know you mentioned it, Scott, but which amendments were not unanimous, just so I can see that in one easy list? That would be wonderful.
Certainly. We have it right there. We'll get it to you.
Thank you. I knew you'd be prepared.
Okay, all right, so we did have 2 miscellaneous items, which I think are probably gonna be really quick. So should we just knock those out before we go in, then we can do all our executive sessions in a row? So, one of them, Nancy Voorhees, who's the joint appointee for the airport board, is we do have four commissioners who have signed off, so it's a majority, so I think you can go ahead. Is everybody comfortable taking that as by leave tomorrow?
Yeah, I am.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll plan on doing that. I see that we do have a proclamation request. This is in the matter of proclaiming and promoting April 30th, 2023 as National Therapy Dog Day, or I'm sorry, Therapy Animal Day. Did anybody want to touch on that?
Yeah, that request came into me and asked if I would be willing to support a proclamation, and I went through it and did a little bit of due diligence, and I think it's a worthy effort, a worthy period to recognize them and stuff, so I'm the one that's bringing it forward.
Okay. Commissioner Jordan, any concern with that?
No,
Okay, all right. So
thank you.
3 head nods to move forward on that. And then I see Washington DC trip for what GSI, who was going to touch on that?
One of the commissioner's staff had brought it up and asked to be on the agenda. I'm not sure if that was just to find out who's going. So I don't know if anyone has any more information. Gina, did you know?
Who wanted to talk about the DC trip?
I thought it was one of the assistants that asked, wanting to know who was all going and not attending.
Okay.
That's all I know about it.
Okay.
Everybody not going, raise your hand. Everybody not here, raise your hand.
I'll be there.
So, and I'll be there, and I am taking, what's her name? Victoria. No, I'm just kidding. Victoria is going with me as well.
Okay. All right.
That answer the question? And you're going?
Sure, I'm not going.
You're not going?
I'm not going this year.
Anybody, is it anybody that's not legislative going?
Is anyone that's not, like the commissioners?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I've heard that you two are. I've heard that Mary is. And I don't know about Amber or Commissioner Jordan, Commissioner Walter.
The ones I'm aware of, it's Commissioners CUNY, Kearns, and French, as well as Victoria and Ron.
I
Chris,
am
are-
not planning to go.
You are not?
Correct.
Amber, are you going?
No, I'm gonna not go. I'm not gonna go this year, but I'm hoping to go next year.
Okay.
Okay, so just the five of us then. Okay. All right.
There we are. Okay, any other miscellaneous items before we go into executive session? No? Okay. Okay, so apparently we have a lot of executive sessions, and I only know what the first one is. So who wants to list off all the, did I hear 4 or did I hear 5 of total? 4? Okay.
So, mine with Scott Chesney will be about 10 minutes long. It's, potential litigation. Present will be the Board of County Commissioners, myself, attorney for building and planning, Mr. Scott Chesney, Scott Simmons, and, Chris, and that will be it for ours.
And then the other one is also gonna be, the other 3 are also pending potential litigation under the 4230-110-1I. Let's see, we're gonna have one of them regarding a potential settlement negotiation with the Kalispel tribe. That should take about 15 minutes. That will be the board, Scott Simmons, myself, and Dale Anderson from my office. The other one is regarding a timber trespass issue. That will also be approximately 15 minutes. That will be board, Scott Simmons, myself, Kyle Tuig, and Wes Zika from my office. And then finally, we'll have a pending potential litigation regarding code enforcement matters. There'll be a number of different matters. That will be the board, Scott Simmons, myself, Scott Chesney. I think that'll be it.
Okay, and the length of each one?
I have 2 that are about 15 minutes, and then one that's about 45 minutes.
Okay.
Ours is about 10.
Then 10, okay, so what was that, so?
Hour and 25.
Hour 25, all right, so hour and 25 minutes. It is 3:07, and at the conclusion of those executive sessions, there,
And yeah, no action.
Yep,
in
no.
any of those.
no action, and so at the conclusion of those, we will adjourn for the day. Again, it is 3:07, and we are headed into executive session.